Duran.
Welcome to an awesome new episode of VO Buzz Weekly.
Yes, indeed.
We are excited.
We are. Why are we excited?
Well, we're always excited because we love doing the show, right?
Yes, absolutely.
However, today our guest is voiceover royalty, hands down, and it's taken a while to get this in the works, but she is here. She is Andrea Romano, voice director extraordinaire and casting director, actor.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In advance, I'm telling you right now, grab your coffee, grab your popcorn, take out your notepad, grab a bunch of pencils, because you guys are going to get a lot of great stuff from a legend in the industry.
Absolutely.
And we should probably start right about now.
Absolutely. Guys, our guest is one of the most respected and loved women in voiceover. She is a voice director, casting director, and actress with 22 Daytime Emmy nominations and 8 Daytime Emmy wins to her credit. And speaking of her credits, her resume takes epic and impressive to a whole new level, with credits like Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, SpongeBob SquarePants, and all things Batman and Justice League. We are so honored to get buzzed with the beautiful and brilliant Andrea Romano.
Yay!
Aw, thank you very much. Nice to be here.
You hear the audience clapping?
I hear them. I sing. May I make a correction?
Yes.
I have closer to 40 nominations now.
Really?
Yeah,
See,
I lost count
not
at
even
35.
the internet can keep up with you.
I lost count at 35.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm so proud of every single one of them.
Yeah.
But there was one year when I was nominated. There are typically 5 nominees per category, and there was one that I was nominated for. I was 3 of the nominees in the category and didn't win.
Oh no!
So I have had plenty of non-wins, but just the nomination is
Oh my
a win
gosh.
in and of itself.
That is
Well,
so
that is
awesome?
amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you must be very, very proud.
I am extremely proud.
Do you think that's because you're so
Well-deserved.
great?
Aww.
Or do you think it's because
You know-
you're cute and great? Or do you think...
Beauty
I think
and
it is.
brains.
I
It's
think
a combination.
I like so much what I do.
Yeah.
I love actors, and I respect every moment that they go through just to get in front of me. I was an actress first,
Yeah.
and then I was an agent, assistant, and then I was an agent, and then a casting director, and
Yeah.
director. So I have a very good understanding of all of the aspects of what gets any actor in front of
Yeah.
me at any given moment, and what they've had to sacrifice and go through. And I think that respect is felt by the community, and so I think that's part of why I'm acknowledged.
I think
the way
so
I am.
too. That's
Yeah.
a good answer.
Thanks,
we're gonna hold
Yeah.
on to that one.
All right, then.
Speaking of agent and acting and all this crazy background, can you please take us through how it all began from
Sure.
acting to being an agent and then on to Hanna-Barbera and how it all began for you?
Absolutely. I've had a dream career, and we spent some time together recently in Atlanta at a voice conference, and I was the keynote speaker, which was very
Yes.
lovely for them
Yes.
to invite me to do that. And I kind of told them the same story, which was, I am the living example of dreams can come true. And when I was about 10 years old, I was thinking about what I would like to be like when I was an adult and what would my career like to be. And I knew I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. I did not know in what capacity yet, but I wanted to work with actors and in that world. And I wanted to be married to someone from a foreign country who spoke with an accent and who was an artist. And I'm married to Rogério Nogueira, who's a well-known Brazilian caricaturist and
Check, check,
cartoonist.
check.
I know,
Yeah,
I know,
check, check,
I know.
check.
And I work
Yeah.
in the animation industry.
Yeah.
Now, at
Andrea
that
will be
time-
teaching manifesting seminars.
and so the back in the day, there really was a very small voiceover community. It wasn't the big, well-known environment that so many people have access to now. So I didn't even know that was an option when I was a kid, but I was the biggest cartoon fan. Love, love, love cartoons. And my favorites were ones like Huckleberry Hound and Quick Draw McGraw and Yogi Bear and the real classic age of the
course.
Hanna-Barbera
Yeah.
cartoons. And I had the great good fortune many years, later in my story to work with almost all of those actors, if not all of them. But so I grew up on Eastern Long Island. I'm one of those very few human beings who actually was born and raised in the Hamptons. I mean, you just don't hear about that.
know,
And I always feel that I have to give the disclaimer that we were not the wealthy Hamptonites. We were the poor locals. And so, and it took traveling around the world throughout my adult life to realize that that is one of the most gorgeous places on the planet.
is.
Absolutely.
And we were very lucky to grow up there. And my mother was very smart to move us there when we were very young. And I'm one of 8 kids, enormous family. And there's only 2 younger than I. There's 2 boys and then 6 girls in a row.
Right on.
Huge family. And they're also back there on Long
There's
Island.
5 girls in my family.
Is that right? It's amazing, isn't
It's
it?
amazing,
They're
yeah.
like built-in friends. We really do get along. I do believe that a large part of why they are such good friends of mine is that I live 3,000 miles away from them. So it's not the day-to-day family stuff that goes on. It's much more. Anyhow, I had a very supportive family, and when I was the first one to go away to college. We really didn't have any dough, but I managed to score a Regent scholarship, a New York State Regent scholarship, which pays for your tuition as long as you stay in New York State and go to a New York State school. So I actually chose my college with a ruler. I went, okay, from West Hampton to this college and this college. And not that I didn't love my family, but I wanted to go as far as I could.
A little space.
Exactly. I would have loved to have come to California, but I didn't have a Regent scholarship here. So I found a couple of colleges, and I was actually a music student at the time. I played bass clarinet. Very cool instrument, which I really loved. And I was accepted at State University of New York at Fredonia. And that is 60 miles southwest of Buffalo. I hadn't thought about the weather aspect yet. But they had an excellent music program. And then just before I left to go to college, they sent me these final documents that said, you know, pick your major, make sure you have your major. And I went, I don't know if I can make music my life forever and ever. And then I saw at the very bottom of the list, theater arts. And I thought, that sounds good. I think I could live in that world. And so I checked that and changed my major like 3 weeks before leaving for college. Now, Fredonia has a wonderful theater program, a truly, truly wonderful theater program. Bob Weinstein, right, of the Weinstein? Sorry. Frankenstein. He graduated from there. Mary McDonald graduated from there. Beautiful campus, a lovely place, but it is 60 miles southwest of Buffalo. So I graduated a semester early, which was the winter of '77. See how very old I am. Which was, until recently, the most intense winter on record. It was 40 below zero for 3 weeks in a row.
Whoa, yeah.
And so I was fleeing that. And so I doubled up on my courses and tried to get the heck out of there. And was an acting student, took wonderful acting classes and some directing. And what Fredonia really had going for it, and something that actually has worked for my entire career, is they taught you every aspect of theater arts. You had to learn how to build a flat. You had to learn theater makeup. You had to learn everything, costuming. You had to, so that you had an appreciation for what everybody contributed to it. And that's key, I think, in success in any industry, is to know what everybody else is doing that makes the whole that you're all making. And so I was getting ready to leave Fredonia, so I packed up all my stuff, and then the high school reached out to me and said, would you direct our high school musical? For the grand sum of $500, which in 1977 was a big chunk. I know, it was a big chunk of change. And so I was like, yes, I will stay and do that. It'll be great fun, and I will bear through this winter. And so I stayed for about 2 or 3 more months and directed. And it was called Carnival, was the musical, which the movie Lily was based on. Leslie Caron, a beautiful, sweet, sweet, sweet musical. And I used all my theater arts friends to help me with costumes and makeup and everything. It was fantastic. So I left Fredonia and then went to graduate school at Rutgers in New Jersey, to the Mason Gross School of the Arts at Douglas College. Another alumnus of that school is John DiMaggio. He went there too. Decades later, but still. And that had a wonderful theater program where Bill Esper taught there, and Avery Brooks, the beautiful actor, taught voice and movement, and Eileen Blumenthal, I was her graduate assistant, and she was the theater critic for the Village Voice, and a lot of working people. They weren't your typical college professors. They were actually working professionals who worked in New York City and then would come and teach their classes and then go back into the city where they worked and lived. And so that was a really nice connection with true working individuals. But after a year there, I thought, I've got to get out of academia. I don't want to be in this school thing. I've got to go try and see if I can do it. Now, I need to preface this by saying, throughout my college career, the 4 years of undergraduate and the 1 year of graduate school, I managed to put on 85 pounds. Now, college, when you first...
You were trying to stay warm.
Part of it. And you know, that part of that coast, you just put on another layer.
I know, I'm from Binghamton. I grew up in Binghamton.
Oh,
so...
well, you so well know this then. You just put on another layer. And also, you go to college and you have to, at your first year, live in the dorms, which means you have to get the food program, which means your dinner is spaghetti and French fries. And so, you know, that was just...
You can't help it.
It was. So here I am in New York City, moved from New Brunswick, New Jersey, which is where Rutgers is, to New York to try to try this thing, to actually audition. And so my day would consist of, you had to have a job too, as most actors or wannabe actors have to do. You have to have something that makes you money while you're trying to pursue that field. And so I was the cashier at Capizio in the Village, which was the dance store and high fashion. And it was the big store. It was a really cool store, right
those
in
things were
the
like
village.
so happening.
That was
Everybody
a nice
came through.
I wore
Rock and
Capizios.
rollers. Oh yeah, rock and rollers came through. Actors came through. It was just really cool to see people. And so my day would consist of leaving my apartment I lived up, it was only like a block or two from Harlem, and this was before Harlem was gentrified. It was up on East 93rd, between 2nd and 3rd. And so I would go from there at like 9 in the morning, whatever, do a couple of auditions here and there that I could, go to Capizio at 11, prep the store. Store opened at noon. At 4 o'clock we had our lunch break, your staggered lunch break. I would go off and do a couple other auditions if I could, run back to Capizio, work until 8 when it closed, and then either go do a play if I was lucky enough to get cast in something, or take a class, or do arguably one of the most difficult jobs on the whole planet, which is phone sales. And so I have great sympathy for people who do phone solicitation, and I'm very polite to them, but I get them off the phone fast. And I'll tell you a quick story, if I may, about that, to digress a bit. I sold 2 very good products, so it wasn't odious. One was TV Guide, and it was actually a very good deal. It was a really good deal to subscribe.
It helps when you believe in the product.
Exactly, it did. And the other thing was Weekly Reader. Do you remember that publication for kids?
Reader,
And the calls came from a pre-existing subscription list. So the kids had a subscription already, and you were just asking them if they wanted to re-up for the next year. So it was not as bad as some others could be. And they give you these notebooks, and whenever the person on the phone gives you a response, you flip and give them the response that's been rewritten. That's been written for them.
Whether it fits or not.
That's right. So I got very good at, hi, this is Andrea Romano. I'm calling from Weekly Reader. Your son Johnny had a subscription last year, and we're wondering if you would like to re-up for this year. And you're always being listened to by supervisors. They're wanting to see how your form is and how good you are and if you're clear and following their guidelines.
Quality assurance.
So would Johnny like to re-up his subscription for next year? Johnny passed away last year.
No.
And of course, there really is no. And I said, I am so sorry for your loss, and I apologize for the phone call. I hope I didn't disturb you. And I hung up the phone, and I was quite shaken. It was just the first time that I'd ever come across, and I didn't know these people, but for a kid, horrible. And the supervisor came over and said, you should have asked if Johnny had a sibling.
No.
And so that was the night I picked up my purse and left and never went back to phone solicitation. It was really nasty. It was just dreadful.
And that's what it's all about. It's
there is no humanity.
None at all. No, it was sales. And you got a little salary, but then you made commissions.
Right.
And so you were inspired to sell as many as you could. And I was pretty successful because I actually would go off script and just go, this really is a good deal. If you buy this, on the stands, it's going to cost you this much more, if you liked it already. So it was easy for me to sell them, and I did well, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I couldn't do it. So there I was in Manhattan, and I had always had this drive to live on the West Coast, or to go to the West Coast. I'd have my friends in high school and elementary school. During spring break, they would come to California, and they would come back tan. In February or March. And you go, how can that? Now, this was a beach community that we lived in West Hampton Beach, so tans were familiar from, June through August, but this was so I always had this draw for California. I always wanted to go. And I only found out a few years ago that I was conceived in Santa Monica.
Wow.
So my roots were actually out here all along. My parents took one cross-country trip, and that was the trip where I was.
And you just found out recently?
Yeah, only in the last couple of years I found out.
Oh my God.
I know, isn't that cool?
Yes, that's cool.
I have, as if I don't have enough siblings already, I have a guy that's a half-brother, we refer to him. He was in the Air Force with my oldest brother, and when they left the Air Force, he came and lived with us for years. And so he had moved to San Diego, and we were always in touch. And this was long before internet. We would phone each other. And he said, Andrea, there's a flight from JFK to LAX for $100.
Wow.
And I had at the time $500 in my bank account.
Right.
And so I bought the $100 ticket. I packed all my stuff in my mom's attic, and with $400 to my name, I took the plunge and moved to Southern California, to San Diego, where no one told me there was no acting work. And I mean, there's San Diego Rep and there's Old Globe, but
but
you really kind of have to be established to work in those places. And then there's dinner theater and community theater, which I did. But again, I was 200 pounds. And I'm only 5 foot tall. There's just not that many roles.
Right.
And I was a fair actress. I was an okay actress. I'm not, I wasn't stellar. I was good. I knew I was okay. I could do a good audition. I could do a good performance, but I had a physicality that had to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And so a dear friend of mine who had gone to Fredonia called me. He was in Los Angeles. He was working at a talent agency called the Ann Wright Agency. It was a theatrical agency, and he was a theatrical agent. And he said, a friend of ours, Vanessa Gilbert, a voiceover agent's assistant at the time at Abrams Rubaloff, Don Pitts was the agent. She's been in a car accident. Can you come up and interview for a temp job? And I thought, voiceover? Well, they're not going to care what I look like. Let me go explore this and see what I can find out as an actress.
Right.
Meanwhile, do a temp job maybe for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
I was determined to never make a living typing. That was always the question when you're trying to find work in New York, is how many words can you type? And I'm like, I can't. And now, of course, we all have to type because we're
now it's like I kill myself every day.
I know. All the girls that really learned it in high school, you hear them on the phone, you hear them on the computer, you know they took classes, and they were really good. So the first thing they had me do at Don Pitt's office was type a letter. I'm like, oh Lord. So we had a really old-fashioned manual.
Are you the two-finger?
Well, I could place them
so
right.
hard on those manuals. It's like you have to stand on it.
Yes, and it had one of those very strange margin releases where if you pressed one margin release, it like zipped it over, and if you pressed the other one, it zipped it over, and I froze the return. Oh. So I broke Don Pitt's typewriter, and I said,
"That's a heck of a first day."
Yeah, Mr. Pitts.
Yeah, this one's a goner.
Now, a really good thing was my friend Anthony Bardeo, his dear friend Susan Chico, who I knew, was Noel Rubaloff of Abrams Rubaloff's assistant, and she had an IBM Selectric electric, and I said, "Can I type it on your?" And so it's got a correctable and the whole deal. So I typed the letter, but really it was more about personality and phone work and stuff. And so I had the phone work experience.
Absolutely.
I knew actors, I understood it, and they hired me on the spot. And so I learned a lot about clients like Frank Welker and Paul Winchell and June Foray and all these voiceover giants.
Yes.
I mean, I really,
what
the
a
person
way
that
to enter into
how about
all
that? And oddly enough, the person that blew me away the most was Paul Winchell, because the Winchell and Mahoney show was something that I was very familiar with, and a lot of people don't know it. He was a wonderful ventriloquist. He was the voice of Tigger, of course, on Winnie the Pooh.
Right.
And in his spare time, invented the valve for the artificial heart.
I know, there was that little
Yeah, he had a
thing.
little time to do that too. I mean,
Such a slacker, that one.
Yeah, a true genius. But so I was, and when I met him, he was wearing a leisure suit. I remember it so well. I was like, but such
With
a
the
dear,
collar
wonderful
out to
man.
his shoulders.
Oh yeah, and it was brown. I'll never forget it. It was just truly, truly
like
dreadful.
Salisbury steak.
Exactly. And so after a few weeks, and I really enjoyed the work. I really liked playing with actors and chatting with them and giving them their appointments and knowing when they said, Andrea, I can't make it from Cahuenga, which I had to learn how to pronounce.
Yeah.
Cahuenga. And Hanna-Barbera was on Cahuenga West, so I had to say it a million times.
Every day.
And there were some very, very tolerant wives and assistants and actors who would say, it's Cahuenga, Andrea. You'll get it, don't worry, it's Cahuenga. And so, all those names, those Mexican names and things, Indian names that I had to learn, Lancashire and
Sepulveda.
everything. For so long.
I thought it was Laurel Sin. I'm like, the CYN, because I didn't know it was Canyon.
Exactly.
They didn't tell me it was abbreviated.
And so about 2-3 weeks into temping, doing this job, I get a call from Vanessa, and she said, Andrea, I just really need to tell you, first of all, everybody's saying such good things about you, and they're mistaking you for me because our voices are very similar.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm not going to come back there. Once I do recover, I'm going to, and it was a very serious car accident she was in. She had to recover for years. Yeah. And she said, I'm going to go off and do something else. So I just wanted to tell you up front. And so they offered me a full-time position there as a voiceover assistant, and I was delighted to be there. And then within, I'd say maybe 6-8 months, they franchised me as an agent. And for a little period of time, I was the youngest agent in Hollywood.
Wow.
And that made me really
The youngest
happy.
agent in Hollywood. See, if we had an award for that, you'd win that one
I
too.
could have had one. I could have put Barbie clothes on that too, like I do with Miami's.
Oh my gosh. She was predestined.
So here I am at Abrams Rubaloff, which was one of the grand agencies, enormous client list, 350, 400 clients. It had an on-camera division as well as a voiceover division, and it had a division that represented talk show hosts and game show hosts, and that was a really cool niche of actors and talent. So the Wink Martindales and all those guys that did that work, Rod Roddy and all those guys. So one of the things that I decided to do as soon as I became a franchised agent was I thought, okay, now I'm committing to this. I haven't 100% given up being an actor, but I'm going to do this for a while because it's fun to be on the other side. But let me take a voiceover class. Let me learn exactly what it is that these people are doing. And so MG Kelly, who was a DJ at the time here in LA and quite well known, Machine Gun Kelly, he was teaching a really wonderful voiceover class. And to tell you how times have changed, I think it might have cost $250. It was an 8-week-long workshop, and at the end of it, you got a consultation, a private consultation with MG, and then a recording day of doing a demo, and then you got a demo, and that was all for like $250.
Wow!
Now a class of 6 weeks is $600, and a demo is another $600, and that's a whole other thing. And so, but it was really fun. And it was really good for me to get behind the microphone and really experience what the actors are going through, and you discover that remarkable phenomenon where you get behind the microphone and all the liquid drains from your mouth and appears on the palms of your hands. And you can't even speak. And so one of the first things I learned was always have water with you in a recording studio because you're going to dry up. You're just going to. So that was a great learning experience. I also understood a lot about when actors would say, if you really want my deepest voice and that's what you're having me audition for, give me an early morning call. I'm better than, once my voice has warmed up, it lightens, or vice versa. As my voice warms up during the day, I can hit those deeper tones, you know, schedule me that way. And so I was very agreeable to those kinds of things and to finding parking and, you know, all those issues that actors had to deal with to get from one, because it's a horrible feeling to be late for an audition. You're behind. You're already sweating, and the best is to show up early so you can take a look at whatever sides they may have for you that have changed since they sent it ahead of time. You can prepare yourself, and I always tell actors that on the occasions when I do teach that if you get there early and they say, "Oh, great, we're ready for you. Come on right in," and you need those 5 minutes, ask for them. Because then you've wrecked the whole point of getting there early. You want to compose yourself and do the best job that you can. This is your shot. And you know, a lot of people get nervous about auditioning, and I always loved auditioning because in my mind it was, somebody wants to see me give a little mini performance. How cool! They want to see me perform. Dig it! I'm going to go do this thing. So on camera, theatrical, and then voiceover. It's like, let me do this thing. And so I always encourage people to enjoy the audition procedure, but if that requires 5 minutes of centering before you go in, take the 5 minutes, ask for it. Everybody will be happier in the long run.
I never sign in until I know I'm ready.
Oh, that's good.
Because if you sign in, they think you're...
That's right.
I usually
That's right. That's a good point. I never even thought about that part of it. But so you go in when you're ready. So there I was at Abrams Rubaloff representing this remarkable talent pool, and so many working actors that the majority of my job was simply taking appointments and giving them out, taking call times and giving them out. There was so little auditioning that we had to have clients do because they already had so much work going. But we had serious auditions going on. And at one point we had moved Abrams Rubaloff. Noel Rubaloff was this great guy, is now long gone, God rest his soul. But he liked to have really unusual offices. So the first office he had was on Doheny and Beverly, right next to what is now a Mayfair or something down there.
Something like that.
And it was this wonderful, we called it the bird cage because it had a staircase going up and then a big enough landing space that the assistants' desks were on that. And then in the offices right behind them were the specific agents that they handled. And the receptionist was down below. And so it was the loudest place. Line 3 is for Carol. Line 5 is for Don Pitts. Line 6 is for... It was really just shouty, shouty, shouty. And then you would take the call and go, okay, one moment. Don, it's Marty Engels on line 5. And just, it was all... It was unbelievable. It was like the stock
That's like
market.
amazing.
It was like the stock market.
Yeah.
It really was. It was crazy.
So cool.
And really cool. And it was on camera as well as
Yeah,
voiceover.
yeah.
And we shared a lot of the same clients. So it's like, oh wait, if you have an on-camera appointment for him, can we get him over to,
Yeah.
you know, Bob
Right.
Lloyd's voice caster by this?
Right.
And it was great. It was an excellent training ground. And I met some of my dearest friends there. So then we moved to Los Feliz, to right next to AFI, to a mansion, a big, beautiful mansion that frankly was not zoned for business. And we probably could have gotten away with it except for all the auditions that required the voiceover actors to come up and park, and the neighbors started to complain.
Yeah.
But it was this stunning 3-story mansion with a wine cellar. And the wine cellar was the recording booth.
How cool is that?
Isn't that cool? I mean, it was really, really cool. And the bedrooms were converted to offices only in that there were desks and file
Sure,
cabinets,
yeah.
but we didn't change the
structure,
configuration
yeah,
at
yeah.
all. And so it was wonderful. It had a gorgeous backyard, a full chef's kitchen. I mean, stunning, great
Wow.
place. And then Noel Rubaloff passed away, and the neighbors really got up about it. And if Noel had lived, I think he would have fought it and probably won because he was just that tough a guy.
Yeah.
But we had to move, and we moved down to Third and Crescent Heights.
Okay.
And then very shortly after we moved there, I was headhunted to start a voiceover agency for special artists, which is a boutique agency, a much smaller,
Right.
represented
Yep.
maybe 90 clients. All on-camera clients, they had no voiceover department. And what happens then is those clients want voiceover activity, so they have to go elsewhere to find it. They find an agency that has voiceover and on-camera. The
And they
on-camera
move.
Yeah.
department wants
Across
to...
the board,
and
yeah.
so Special Artists very wisely said, if we have a voiceover division, then our clients will stay here, because they were a terrific
Yeah.
on-camera
Yeah,
department.
yeah.
So I was the startup, and it was wonderful because I had
I
very,
bet.
very talented on-camera people, and I was able to really cultivate a very good voiceover division. They also had a very nice celebrity division, and so you know the whole measure of success in a department like that is, did you pay for the department over the year?
Right.
So you only need 1 or 2 accounts for a James Coburn or a Martin Sheen or those guys, and then you've paid for it. But meanwhile, you're cultivating a scale client list, so they go
Right.
in for the
Right.
$250 radio commercial, and
Yeah.
they'll audition for it and all those guys. And I represented such wonderful actors like Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy, you might remember from the first Invasion of the Body Snatchers. He was the lead.
Yeah.
William Wyndham, who I happened to see at Fredonia when I was a student. He was doing a one-man show for Thurber. The Thurber, it was a Thurber show. And then years later, I represented him, and it was really cool to just go, I met you so many years ago. And it was just one of those really cool crosses in time. And then I was there for about maybe 2 years. So I was an agent in total for maybe 4.5, 5 years. So now we're up to about 1984. And I get a phone call from Ginny McSwain, who at the time was the casting director at Hanna-Barbera.
That's right.
And Ginny had been very good to me,
she's
both at Abrams
great.
Rubaloff when I was there because I had such a huge client list, and at Special Artists at giving me a chance. She'd call me up and she'd say, Andrea, I have a gift role, which means practically anybody with a pulse could do it. But who do you have that needs a voiceover job, and send me somebody good? So I would sweat and think and go and you know, as an agent in that kind of agency, you are also a casting director. You're just casting from your own client list. You're not casting the entire pool. You're casting just your client
pressure.
list. So and you want to, and when you're just given a gift like that, you want to make sure. And so I was very lucky to kind of nail it whenever she, and then she'd say, I have a real guest role. Give me your best guy. And I go, okay, how about Alan Rich? A wonderful, she goes, I recognize him, his on-camera work. Let's give him a shot. And so those guys, and she'd call me up afterwards and say, you have to remind me of guys like that. You have a wonderful client list. And she was very, very kind to me. And she would also do this wonderful thing called general auditions, which is, because at that time there were actual seasons in animation, you knew when the downtime was. There was an actual pilot season, if you will. And so during her downtime, because they had their own committed studio there at a recording studio at Hanna-Barbera, she would call all the agents and say, send me 5 actors that I don't know of your client list, and tell them to prepare 5 minutes of material, and I'll also give them cold readings while they're there, which was a beautiful thing. Nobody does that anymore because nobody really has committed studios that they don't have to pay for, and there's not really a downtime anymore. There's not seasons. Things run all year long. So she had been so very kind, and she also used to invite me to come and watch sessions. And so in my education of this field, I would go and watch Frank Welker's sessions and my client sessions that Abrams at Special Artists, and I would go to as many sessions as I
Yeah.
could squeeze in because it was so fun. And that's when I met Gordon Hunt and watched what this magic was of creating cartoons. Now, I've said that I was a big cartoon fan.
Yep.
I became a 10 times over cartoon fan when I watched how it was made.
Wow.
So Gigi gives me a phone call one day and she said, I just wanted to tell you, I'm calling everybody individually to say that I've given my 2-week notice at Hanna-Barbera. I'm gonna go off and direct at Marvel. And this was the golden age, the second golden age, the third golden age of animation when it had exploded.
Yeah.
And it was the time when all the baby series came out, which is Muppet Babies, son of
Yeah.
Right,
Batman
everyone
and,
in Son.
and
Yeah.
Son,
Yeah. Son
Pink
of
Panther
Batman.
and
And
Son,
Son.
a pup named Scooby-Doo. Everything
Yeah,
was
yeah.
so we were making massive numbers of cartoons, Smurfs, Snorks, enormous orders of those cartoons, and there were enormous casts, and so
Because they were buying like 65 episodes at that time, right? They
amazing.
actually-
Before
yeah.
then, it had been 13 episodes, 26 episodes. Now suddenly
Oh,
65
can you imagine
episodes.
if they started that?
Oh, it was remarkable. So I said, Ginny, who's going to take over for you? Because you've been so good, and it's been this wonderful pipeline I've had to not only go and watch sessions on a selfish level, but get my clients in there. And she said, we don't know. We're seeing people over the next week, and we'll let you know. And the next day she called me and said, Andrea, would it interest you? Do you have any desire? And I was head over heels with the idea. And I've told this story before. It was like a cartoon itself. My phone was left spinning in the air as I zipped off and showed up in front of Gordon
Your
Hunt's
whole
desk.
life was being at the right place at the right time,
And not being too scared to take the risk. Because,
Exactly.
going from a salaried job at any given time to a freelance job or whatever, all those risks, moving
Sure.
from New York with 400 bucks
I know,
and
that's big
all
time.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And it is a lot about risk taking and just feeling it out and just going, is this right for me? Should I take, let's go for it. Or I'm going to play the safe route on this decision. So I go and meet with Gordon Hunt, whom I had met, and we had this wonderful conversation about my theatrical background and my love of theater and the plays I had seen. And I think one of the things that clinched it for me was, I mentioned, he asked me, what was one of the first Broadway shows you ever saw? And of course, when I was living in New York, I didn't have 2 cents to rub together. So I always had to get any kind of discounted ticket or whatever I could. And I said, I saw this one play, Gordon, that nobody's ever seen. It was with Joel Grey and Anne Rankin. It was a musical, and it was called, and I'm going to space on the name of it. It was about the Dauphin, Good Time Charlie it was called. And he said, my brother directed that.
No.
Peter Hunt. And I said, I love that. I love that musical so much, and it didn't do well, and it didn't last for very long.
Yeah.
But it was one of my favorite things that I saw. And then we had lots of wonderful conversations, and they hired me the next day. And so I left Special Artists and went over and became the casting director at Hanna-Barbera. Now, being the casting director at Hanna-Barbera was truly a dream come true. The first day I met Dawes Butler, who
Oh, my
was
gosh.
as talented, as genius as Mel Blanc, but Mel had a better publicity thing going because he was an on-camera actor as well,
Right.
and he got it, that the publicity thing was something he wanted to do. I think a lot of the other voiceover actors who were so stellar, they didn't really care about it. They liked the fact that they could make the money they were making
Right.
and
And
go
be
into a restaurant and
anonymous.
afford
Yeah.
whatever restaurant they wanted to go to, but
Exactly.
they didn't have to worry about people bugging them during their dinner. And so here's Dawes Butler, the voice of Yogi Bear. I mean, practically any Hanna-Barbera cartoon that you IMDb, you'll see his name on.
Yep.
And he was a tiny little thing. He was no taller than I, and I'm 5 foot. He might have been shorter than I. Also a stunning teacher, and I had gone to several of his classes later. But when I first met him at Hanna-Barbera, I said, I can't believe I'm getting to shake your hand. Because, we didn't have access to those actors if you didn't work in the industry. We didn't have comic cons or things that you can go and meet the
Right,
voice
right.
actors. And so, Mr. Butler, it is such a joy. Oh, Andrea, please, it's Dawes. And I said, Huckleberry Hound was my favorite character in the whole world. And he spoke to me as Huckleberry Hound.
Oh, my.
And I lost it. I just burst into tears. It was a completely unexpected reaction. I had no idea that it would take this emotional turn on me, which was just zipping me back in time. You know how like a scent, you'll go,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
smells like
Yeah.
the bus I used to take to elementary school,
Yeah.
or that smells like the field I used to walk through, whatever. It just zips you back in time. Well, this voice just zipped me back to being in my feety pajamas, in front of the TV with my bowl of cereal, watching a Huckleberry Hound cartoon.
sweet.
And it took me a while to actually figure why that cartoon was so special to me. And then I realized that it was because Huckleberry Hound was the first for me to break the fourth wall. He'd be having that scene and he'd be playing it in that wonderful
Yeah,
soft
and then
voice.
he would-
And then he would look right to camera and he'd say, I know why he's doing that. And then he would go on. It's like, but to me, he was talking
To you.
To
Yeah.
you.
He was seeing me there in my feety pajamas, talking right to me. I didn't have a
that's cool.
concept of he was talking to
Yeah.
the camera. He was talking to me. And so I had this joyous 5.5 years at Hanna-Barbera, 84 through 89, when we made the Smurfs. Now, I have to give Ginny complete credit for the main casting on the Smurfs. But then I was... one of the highest compliments I ever got from Ginny was the first casting I had to do on that series was each character had a devil Smurf and an angel Smurf. And unlike many times when that kind of thing is used,
Right.
it would be specific to each character. For this, it was always the same one. And I hired Artie Johnson as devil and William Christopher, who was the priest on MASH, as the angel. And Ginny called me up after she had heard the
Father
casting and
Mulcahy.
said,
Yeah.
fantastic
Wow.
casting, Andrea. And I thought, that's just about praise from Caesar. That
Yeah,
was so
yeah,
lovely.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
so
And
cool.
then I also cast Jonathan Winters as Grandpa Smurf and all the Smurflings. And you always know that that things are going sort of, they're petering out when they start going, okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll throw in this character and this bizarre character from
Right.
space or whatever,
Right. Talking leaves.
Exactly right. But this was really the heyday of those enormous numbers of cartoon shows. The next one that I cast that was strictly my show was called The Snorks, which was essentially the Smurfs underwater.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we did that, and that was, I mean, what a casting. We saw every actor in town, and that probably had 15 regulars on it. And then we were making 65 episodes. And then the Paw Paws and Foofer and, Popeye and Son and,
Yep.
all those shows. Millions. Now, one of my favorite stories is Gordon Hunt also at the time was teaching an acting class. And Joe Barbera had been very kind about, Gordon, keep the acting class going. We want you to keep your foot in that
Yeah.
world because you're bringing us beautiful actors. But I had gone in on my very first day and gone from my office to Gordon with this first recording session. I watched him do the first recording session. The second day he said, Andrea, I teach a class today, so you'll need to direct the 3 or 4 pickups we need to get from Superman on this.
By myself.
Exactly. And thank goodness I had watched as many episodes as he had
Yeah.
done, so I knew how to slate at least.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew to give the actor 3 or 4 takes and get it
Right.
through. And I believe it was Olin Soule who was the voice of Superman, and he had to do 5 or 6 lines, and then that was it. And I remember just, and I survived. But it was wonderful. It's that thing about like
Jump
when
in
you,
the deep end, you
that
know?
and that tingly feeling that goes through your entire body
yeah,
where you
yeah.
are so present and so alive, and you go home, it takes hours to come down. It was remarkable.
So cool, man.
So there I am in Hanna-Barbera doing all these wonderful shows and really running through so many actors. And I would continue on the tradition that Ginny had started of doing the general auditions.
Yeah.
And so I got to meet remarkable people then, Dan Castellaneta, who had not worked yet.
Yes, he went
And
on to do a couple.
A couple things, and Nancy Cartwright, to
Yeah,
keep in that
oh.
vein. And all these wonderful people that have gone on to have voiceover careers, but just wonderful to get, that was a wonderful opportunity, and I'm sad that we can't do that anymore because agencies now, what they do is they send me an email with a link and say, I just signed this new client, and you don't know them yet, but when you have a chance for auditions, give them a shot because I think they're special. And agents don't sign large numbers of people anymore like they used to. They're very selective. So if a Cynthia McLean from SBV calls me or emails me and says, this guy is special, I pay attention.
Yeah.
But I do also like to find new people. I like that. I like finding,
Like maybe Craigslist or something like that? I'm kidding.
yeah,
I'm kidding.
that's where I go.
Yeah.
But truly, I like to develop new talent and say, I gave that actor his first. I gave Mark Hamill his first voiceover gig. I did. I gave Mark Hamill his voice, those kinds of things. I love being able to say that. And as a matter of fact, I just worked with Jessica Walters today, who's so brilliant and stunning on everything she does, and I love her work on Archer. And one of the regrets of my life is that I was not a part of Archer. I was never offered the job, but I would have loved to have been a part of a series as stunning as that. And when I called to offer her this gig, or emailed the agent, because that's what we do now, I said, you might remind her that 25 years ago, I cast her at Hanna-Barbera on a series called Wildfire. She was the villainess Diabolin. And the agent was kind enough to copy and paste her response, which was, please tell Andrea it would be my joy. She gave me my start in the voiceover industry.
Wow,
and so I love that, and today she reminded me of it as we worked.
So many people say that.
Yeah.
So many people say that.
I love starting actors out, and because I have such respect for actors, and I love them so, and I see their fears, and I understand their nervousness, and I hear that happen in their voice. I'm like, step back from the microphone, take a breath. I'm here for you. I want you to do well. Whether it's the audition or the gig, I always promise the actor that I will not let their voice go out sounding bad. I just won't. That's not my point.
Right.
And I know there are some casting directors that are not as kind. I don't understand it. When you give the actor the tools that they need, the information that they need, and put them in front of a microphone, why wouldn't you want them to be the right one?
Absolutely.
So you can be done
Right,
and, go home.
You're all on the same, it's like we're all on the same team. I mean, don't you think your experience as an actor, you're a stage actor yourself, an agent, I mean, and that's what is always said about you, is that you are an actor's best friend, you are an actor's director.
I am. I am.
And, I mean, and even sometimes you're doing some acting here and there. You'll be woman number 5. And
I've been the voice of the back computer for years.
yeah.
I love doing that countdown thing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I love all that kind of computerized sort of. But and I'm always like the older woman in distress. If someone's been like
Leave me alone.
mugged by a
Yeah.
I'm that character very often. But so this remarkable thing happened while I was at Hanna-Barbera. I was approached by a gentleman who used to be an advertising executive at Leo Burnett, a very well-known agency. And Tom Ruzicka is his name. And he called me up one day and he said, Andrea, I'm over at Disney TV Animation. Brand new startup company. I know that sounds ridiculous, but they didn't have a TV division yet.
Yeah.
And so he said, we're going to do a series called DuckTales, based on Huey, Louie, and Dewey, and Scrooge McDuck. And we're going to do 65 episodes, huge number. But we're going to audition directors. And so would you come and direct one of those episodes, and then we'll decide after the first 5 who we're going to have come do the rest of the 60 remaining episodes. I said, I would love to. Let me make sure Hanna-Barbera is cool with this. So I checked, and they said, sure, go aheid. And so, which I thought was amazing. And I think they thought I wouldn't get the gig. Not that they didn't believe in me. They thought, well, 5 other people, people with more experience, are going to probably get the gig. So somebody directed the first episode, and it took them 8 hours, which the Screen Actors Guild allows you, 8 hours for the first episode of any series. I came in and did the second episode in 4.
Is that a long time to direct?
8 hours is interminable.
That's a long time.
It's a really long time. It never should take that long. I mean, if you know what you're doing, if you are well prepped, if you don't have 12 people behind you who are arguing about what the show is, you should be able to do it in 4 hours. But it's very kind of the Screen Actors Guild to allow you that much time to explore
for the first
and
one.
play. Exactly. So the second episode I go in for, and I did it in 4 hours. And they said, you know what, we're not even going to have anybody else do it. We like what you did so much. Let's just have you do the rest. And okay. And then I went back to Hanna-Barbera and said, you guys cool with this? Because one day a week I'm going to be gone for 4 hours to do, and they were like, no, we're good. Which is remarkable. Thank you, Hanna-Barbera, for that. I don't know why you allowed me to do that, but you gave me my directing career. And I stayed on staff, which meant I had paid vacations and insurance and sick days, which was really remarkable.
Sure.
So then a little bit of time passes, and I'm still doing all those shows at Hanna-Barbera and directing over at Disney. And then Disney gave me a couple of other series that Hanna-Barbera was okay with as well. So I did a bunch of Winnie the Pooh episodes. How cool to have that on my resume. Winnie the Pooh.
And Jim Cummings.
And Jim Cummings and Paul Winchell and all those wonderful actors. And Russi Taylor, my God, so stunningly brilliant. And Rescue Rangers, which was the Chip and Dale series, which was really difficult to record because we didn't have the technology we do now. We were working reel to reel, which meant we'd rehearse the whole thing, do a table read, record all the actors who were not sped, keep Tress MacNeille and Corey Burton to play Chip, Dale, and the little
So some of them were
creature.
sped and some of them weren't?
Right. So those three, the chipmunks and the one little, I forget the name of the character, I'm embarrassed to say. But what we would do is we would slow the tape down 50%, and the actors would be recorded acting like this. They would bring the tape back up to speed and have to listen back to that entire recording session of those lines, make sure it was clear, make sure it didn't sound like the
that.
actors were doing that, and that there was clarity, pick up everything. So those were very long, tedious sessions, but it worked. Now it's a piece of cake. You have all the electronics to make
Of course,
that happen.
record it regular and change it.
Absolutely. And so Winnie the Pooh, Chip and Dale, yes, and Rescue Rangers. And then this is around 1986 now, and the Screen Actors Guild struck against all the animation houses, and there was a work stoppage. So Hanna-Barbera laid us all off temporarily. Meanwhile, some people signed an interim agreement, and what that means is that companies say whatever is ultimately decided between all the big major companies and the Screen Actors Guild, we will abide by.
Right.
Will you let us continue production? And they say, yes, of course, if you'll agree to whatever. And that makes total sense.
Sure.
So I get a phone call from Fred Wolf, and he says, I've got this silly series, 5 episodes, a mini-series. It's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I said, Fred, based on the title, yes, I want to do it. But let me check with Hanna-Barbera and see if they're cool with that. And I went back, and they said no.
They said no.
Because they said it doesn't show strength from the company Hanna-Barbera to sign on for another, to let our employees start
People
going
go,
out. And I
yeah.
get it,
Okay.
I get
Yeah,
it.
I get it.
But what's
Yeah.
so wonderful is now, some 20 years later, I'm
know
now
you're on
directing
it.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the one that Nickelodeon
I love
is
all
making.
your full circle moments.
So isn't that cool? I know,
Love
it really
it.
does come around.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
if you just sort of leave it open.
Yeah.
And so I thanked Fred so very, very much for that offer, and explained to him why I had to decline, and turned him on to Susan Blue and said, you know, she might be somebody you should consider, and then that all happened
Yeah.
beautifully for everybody, and I'm happy that turned out the
Yeah.
way it did.
Yep.
So then time goes by, and 5 or 6 of my fellow Hanna-Barbera employees, now we're at 1989, they want to form Warner Brothers TV animation. So that's a goodly amount of time that Disney had the drop on everybody, as they always have.
Yes.
They just have really just broken ground on a lot of things
Yeah.
first. And so then Tom Ruger and Gene McCurdy and a bunch of people are going to form Warner Brothers TV animation. And they called me up and they said, will you come with? And they said it would have to be as a freelance, you'd have to leave Hanna-Barbera. And I said, I completely understand. And that's when you have another one of those moments in
where
your
you-
career, and
Yeah.
you go,
Yep.
am I going to give up the free, I mean, not the free, but the paid vacations and the
Yeah, the
sick days and the
security.
health insurance, which can
Yeah,
be very
yeah, yeah.
costly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I had to make a decision. So, do I leave my steady job at Hanna-Barbera to go to Warner Brothers TV Animation, a startup company?
Can I guess?
Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm gonna say-
Yes, okay.
I did. You
I'm
are
gonna say
right.
yes for 20.
You are right.
I am
Well,
right.
when they said the executive producer of the first series is Steven Spielberg,
Yeah.
I thought, well, that kind of
Yes.
a chance to work
Well-
with Steven Spielberg, and they said, you
Yeah.
know, he's not just going to be a name on the production, because everything that he worked on was Steven Spielberg presents
Right.
Tiny Toon Adventures. Steven
Yeah.
Spielberg presents Animaniacs. And you know, he could have just been a, you know, figurehead, but he wasn't. He was absolutely involved. He had ideas for storylines. He read the storyboards. He would come to some recording sessions. It was really cool. He acted in one of the episodes. I actually did direct Steven Spielberg.
Was he easy to direct?
You know, he was lovely. He's a
How is he as an actor?
wonderful
That would be a no.
director. He's
He's
a
a
wonderful
wonderful
director.
She's very diplomatic.
I loved working with him,
Yeah.
and he's always been incredibly kind to me and always remembers me. And when people ask, he'll say, "Yes, I know Andrea," and that's really cool to say
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah.
So I can say I know Steven Spielberg, but to be able to say that Steven Spielberg actually does know who I am,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And
Well, he's found his lane, which he should probably stay in.
yeah,
right?
he does a good job. He does a good job there. And I've seen him do other acting, and it's wonderful. Good for him. I am delighted for him.
Well, that is the end of part 1. We're going to do something totally different with Andrea Romano because she deserves it. We're going to bring her back to you 2 more times
Yes.
for part 2 and part 3. She has an amazing story.
Oh my gosh, and tons of amazing stories, plus so much incredible advice
Absolutely.
and knowledge
There's
that
no way that we're going to like cut it and have you
No.
only get a piece of it. So please stay with us for the 3 parts
Yes.
because it's going to be way worth
you're
it.
going to hear every single word that happened. We're not cutting out one thing.
Absolutely. So we'll see you next week with part 2.
And keep up with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We love you guys. Thanks so much for watching. And just remember,
You always have time for a little buzz.